Welcome to Dental Business RX. Practice success in 30 minutes or less.
Thank you for calling ABC Dental.
Have you or maybe one of your colleagues, someone that you know, been embezzled from? I was speaking to Sabri about this, and she estimates that probably 1 out of 20 of the new clients that we get either have been embezzled from in the past, or we find active evidence of potential embezzlement. She actually estimates, I think overall, because there's different levels of embezzlement, that it probably happens to about 1 out of 10 dental offices. And beyond the cash loss, obviously that's a problem. You don't want to lose cash. Embezzlement causes a number of other problems. I mean, first off, you as the doctor owner feel betrayed. Right? It may make you start to get paranoid about, hiring new people who may embezzle from you. And we've seen that before. It lowers morale with the team. And it's just overall, an upsetting situation. There's nothing really that fun about it. So it's not something that you really want to deal with. So what are the signs that you might have a problem with this? And even more importantly, how can you avoid being embezzled from in most cases? And that's what I want to talk about this week. I'm going to specifically get into 6 red flags that could show you that you have some kind of a problem. And more importantly, how to secure yourself in most cases against having this happen in your office. My name is Jeff Bloomberg and I'm your host. And obviously, look, I'm going to give you some basic, simple ideas here. This isn't going to cover every scenario. There's lots of different ways this could happen. We're going to cover the most common scenarios that we see. I have seen some really ingenious things that were tough to catch, but those are really the rarity. The majority of the embezzlement cases that we see were 99% avoidable. It just was due to lack of systems and lack of oversight. And how is this normally done in a dental practice? Well, I mean, obviously the obvious one is cash. A patient pays with cash. It doesn't get recorded in the system and the employee takes it, or, the balance is written off or something like this. We've seen it where insurance checks are deposited in the employee's account, which obviously is from the big picture perspective, it's probably not a great idea if you don't want to be traced, right? But usually those are the 2 ways that it happens, cash or, a check is deposited in an account. We very rarely have seen anything with relation to credit cards, although now with easy access to Stripe accounts and Square accounts and things like this, that may be a potential problem that we'll see more of in the future. And how is this usually found out about? Well, in most cases, if we have a new client who comes in and they've been embezzled from, it's usually because they hired a new employee who started looking around and found evidence of it and brought it to the doctor's attention. Like this is happening or has happened. Or we'll find the red flags and we'll point them out to the doctor and they'll look into it. So which brings us to, what are the red flags that you might have a problem here? Well, let's take a look. There's 6. First red flag is a gross discrepancy between production or charges, production and collections. And this is assuming a couple of things. Number one, it assumes that your fee schedule in the system is correct. Okay. Because you could end up with a bunch of adjustments. Let's say you're involved in a number of PPOs and the PPO fee for a crown is, $740, but your normal fee is $1,300. But there's no, the $740 PPO fee for that plan isn't in your dental software and you're entering $1,300. Well, then you're going to end up with a massive write-off each time the insurance pays or the patient pays because you have to fit within that PPO fee schedule. So assuming you have your proper fees for every plan you might be involved in, which by the way, just kind of shows you it's probably a good idea to start thinking about getting out of these. But assuming those fees are in the system, then you shouldn't have this gross discrepancy. Collections should range about 97% of production, assuming that the fees are properly adjusted. In other words, the fee reflects what the actual charge for the procedure was. So about 97%. When you start seeing collections in the low 90s, the 80s or below, this indicates you could have some kind of a problem. Either you might have some embezzlement going on or your collection system or administration, the organization and the administration surrounding how you collect money in the office is just not in good shape. That could be a problem too. Your insurance filing's terrible. Your patient accounting is terrible. But again, it's sort of like, if you have that going on, like you don't have a system and you have a lot of things going that aren't well organized, it makes it easier to hide embezzlement, right? So that's the first big red flag. Collection percentage is just terrible, assuming that the fees have been adjusted. Okay. Number two is your deposits don't match your day sheet. So how are deposits going to be reflected? Well, you may have several different sources or ways that patients pay, right? You have patient third-party financing, in which case you'll get some type of an email or report from the third-party financing company. There's batch reports from credit card charges, right? We'll give you a batch. It'll show you what was charged that day. And then you'll have some type of a deposit slip where, we're taking any checks or cash that you've received from patients and you're putting them in the bank. You might have it where you're, I've seen some offices that take pictures of the checks for mobile deposits, or they have a little, reader that reads the numbers on a check or something. But still, in the majority of cases, what we see is deposits are done manually. So, you've got your cash and your patient checks, as well as any insurance checks, and you're making a deposit slip out and you're bringing it to the bank, right? So in this case, if your deposit slips or your batch reports, et cetera, don't match your day sheet, that indicates there's an error there, or that could be a potential problem. Number three is your deposits don't match your day sheet. So this would be basically where, you've got your deposit slip. We've seen this. The deposit slip matches your day sheet, but what arrives in the bank doesn't match the deposit slip. I should have probably said that better. Your deposits don't match your deposit slips. How's that? So this could happen. So if I'm your employee and I decided to, embezzle some money, well, then I fill out the deposit slip because I know the office manager is going to check the day sheet against the deposit slip, and they do. But I'm not worried about anybody actually looking at what realistically got deposited in the bank to match it up to that deposit slip that I wrote out or printed off. Do you get the idea? So, had 500 cash and another, 3,000 in checks. So it was $3,500. And that's what I fill out on the deposit slip. And that's what it shows in your day sheet. But the actual amount of money that arrives in the bank when you look at your, your online banking or your bank statement was $32.50. There was a $250 discrepancy. If nobody's checking that, right? Or if you happen to check that and you see that those things aren't matching, you may have a potential problem. Number four is if you see inordinate or unusual or excessive adjustment activity. So what do we mean by that? What's an adjustment? Again, going back to that PPO example, I don't have a PPO fee in my computer for a Crown. Say 2740. My normal fee is $1,300 and the PPO is going to pay $750. So then in theory, I'm writing off $550. I'm adjusting that off the patient's account so that the account balances out. So if I have the correct fee in there, I'm never having to do that write-off. So that's important. Okay. Number one. Number two is if you start to see a lot of these adjustments, right? There are just a ton of them. That's a way I could cover up that I'm taking money from you. Okay. So a patient pays me $500 cash for their copay. I pocket the cash, or they give me a check and I deposit it in my account. I just write it off in the system as a courtesy adjustment or, patient financing adjustment. I can write it off with whatever kind of adjustment I want to write it off as. And you would never know because in the day sheet, it'll match the deposit slip, right? Because in that case, everything matches, but there's an adjustment, which brings us to, you have to take a look at how adjustments are made and what the policy is on adjustments in the office, which I'm going to talk about here in a little bit. But when you have these write-offs and adjustments and they're able to be done by whoever wants to do them, that is a minefield for potential embezzlement problems. Okay. Last 2 points is, let's say your software is set up, which most are, to close out your month. Now, why would you close out your month? Because if I close out last month, that means that I can't backdate anything into last month. So I want you to imagine something for a second. Patient comes in, their balance is, let's say they're doing a procedure and their copayment is going to be $500, right? All right. So I collect that copayment of $500. I pocket the copayment. And then what I do is I backdate the adjustment. I give them a $500 credit on account 4 months ago. You would never catch that because they walked in with a $500 credit. So all that's going to show up today is that their insurance balance is $786 because they had a $500 credit on account, which was applied, which doesn't show up in this month's report or on the day sheet anywhere. And they have a zero balance, won't even show up on the accounts receivable report. So if you are supposed to be closing out your month, which you should be, and you are not all of a sudden, that is an extremely bad indicator. And if you're not closing out your month, you should learn how, because this prevents people backdating adjustments, although they could be backdated within the month, right? So if it's the 28th, I could be backdating to the 5th or the 6th. So this is why you want to look for adjustments. So you're getting a lot of unusual adjustment activity, a lot of adjustment activity. It doesn't mean what the adjustment is called. It just means that there's a potential problem. Last point number 6, red flag number 6, is a large accounts receivable. Okay, with a ton of outstanding claims or aged balances, right? Now, again, all of these things can mean also that your system is, terrible, how you're collecting money. And, shameless plug of the episode. On DDS Success, our online training platform on demand, you can watch the videos whenever you want. We have a full financial coordinator training course, which goes over all of this stuff, how to set up your system and collect past due balances and post insurance payments, etc. I would definitely recommend you check that out if you are looking for a system, because if you don't have a system, it is very easy to camouflage someone embezzling from your practice. So I'll put a link to that on the episode webpage if you want to check it out. But back to this point. So you have a large accounts receivable. Let's say you have a bunch of overdue balances, 60 days, 90 days or whatever, and they're just sitting on there. And how many people are on an AR? You might have a couple hundred. So especially if you have insurance balances that you're waiting on, and it can get mind numbing when you're looking at all these names, right? So a couple things you want to keep in mind. If you have a large AR, meaning 1.5 to 2 months or more of your monthly production, okay, so I'm producing 100 a month and I have an AR of $150,000 or more. That is an extremely bad indicator. That again could mean my system stinks, or someone is covering up potentially. I don't want to, I don't want to make you paranoid about this, but I want you just to look at it, covering up potentially that they are, taking patient payments and not doing any kind of an adjustment because they know I'm looking for it, and just leaving it on my AR to sort of drift off into the, the nether world. The problem with this, obviously, with insurances is, in most states in the United States, an insurance company has 30 days to pay or deny a claim. So we know that, right? And obviously we know the contract is between them and the patient, blah, blah, blah. But it's definitely a little bit of a lever you can use to make insurance companies wake up and move a little faster. Number one. Number two, if you don't file that claim within a year, like someone forgot to file a claim, well, you're not going to get paid by most insurance companies. They give you a year. Some give you less. So running long overdue past due balances is bad no matter what you do, no matter how you slice it. Even if the problem isn't embezzlement, it's just that you have no system. It's just also not a good way to do business, okay? But that's the 6th point. If I see an out-of-control AR, 1.5 months or more, a lot of 60, 90, 120-day balances, something is really wrong. All right, so those are your major red flags. So how do you protect yourself against these red flags? Let's talk about this for a second. And I'm going to do my best to give you some basic data. Look, and if you have any questions about this, you can always email us here at MGE. You can email me directly if you'd like, jeffb@mgeonline.com, and I can see if I can point you in the right direction. All right, so what are a couple things you can do? Number one, with over-the-counter collections, patients are paying with checks, cash, credit cards, etc. Obviously, with a credit card, you have a batch report, right? Okay, with cash and checks, okay, a couple things you want to keep in mind. Let's talk about checks for a second. So you want to make sure your checks are deposited daily, obviously, right? And people have asked about this. Well, what about how is a staff member depositing checks from an insurance company or a patient into their personal bank account? I've seen it happen. I've seen people do it for months. You wonder, how is a check made out to Dr. Joe Smith being deposited in, Sally Johnson's checking account? It happens. The amount of oversight on banking or with banking these days is a lot less than it used to be with signature verification or whatever. And look, I'm not really familiar with the banking industry. I know people who are, but in many cases, they're looking at more, they're pulling random or weird transactions and they're red flagging it and checking into it more deeply. In most cases, it's not looked into as hard as it maybe was, let's say 30 years ago. So it can happen. So you want your deposits done daily. With cash deposits, there's a couple things. I know cash isn't used as frequently anymore, but it still is used. And if you're listening to this, there's a good chance you might have some type of a cash box in your office, for petty cash and for making change for patients. Okay, so a couple things about cash. Number one, with your cash box, you should be reconciling, or your financial coordinator should be reconciling the cash box daily. Okay. And if you want a little report for this, like a little form you can use, I'll put that as a download on the episode webpage, a cash reconciliation report. But you want to reconcile this daily because again, if you're not reconciling this daily, it opens the door to, being able to take some of the cash. The other thing is if you get a large payment in cash, which happens, someone gives you $3,000, $2,000, $7,000, that should be deposited immediately. Or deposited rather immediately. I remember talking to somebody years back. A patient came in and paid $7,000, for their treatment plan, and they left it in a drawer for 2 days. And okay, big shocker here, folks. It was stolen. It happens. They were in an office building. We don't know who did it. Could have been somebody who worked for them, a janitorial service. Could have been a patient for all they know. They have no idea. It wasn't like they had cameras or whatever. But if someone pays you $7,000, the office manager should just take a deposit slip and roll over to the bank real quick, okay, and get it out of your hands. But you want to reconcile your cash box daily for cash transactions because that keeps things clean and keeps you on top of it. With insurance checks, I would angle to have any insurance company that you're accepting assignment from to pay you by direct deposit. Most will do it. Maybe some of the smaller union plans may not, but the majority of insurance companies will pay you with direct deposit. This way, that money never ends up physically in anybody's hands. It just goes directly into your bank account. Next thing you should be doing is you should be reviewing your day sheet against your deposit slip daily. Okay. This could be you or it could be the office manager. All right. Depends. If you've got an experienced office manager that you're comfortable doing this, have the office manager do it and they can kind of share with you anything that they might find. So they get the day sheet or you get the day sheet. They took a look at how much was supposed to be deposited today and then they verify it immediately. Here's the cash. Here's the checks. Here's what we're supposed to be getting from credit cards. And here's what we're getting from, this third party or patient financing. There should be records of all of this so that they can see that it's actually happening. And they're doing this every day. Okay. Next thing is on a weekly basis, you should be reconciling your deposit slips and day sheets to your bank deposits. So now I'm looking at, I was supposed to have a batch from a credit card company for $3,975 on Tuesday. Oh, there it is. It's in my B of A or Chase account on, Thursday, right? Like it made it. It was posted on Tuesday and arrived on Thursday. Like I can match up what's in my bank with my banking software or whatever it is that I'm using or the online banking to ensure that I actually receive this money, which brings us to, I still see people who, rather than keeping their accounting software, whatever they're using, QuickBooks or whatever they might be using, in real, up to date in real time. They're not doing this. They're letting their accountant do it and getting a notification a month and a half later about how to reconcile their accounts. That just leaves you open to potential problems. All right. I wouldn't do that. There's no reason why someone can't keep your deposits up to date daily, weekly, or whatever. And then you verify these against what was supposed to actually make it into the account and you can catch problems before they become a big problem. Next thing is I would look at on a monthly basis, your accounts receivable and any adjustments and flag anything that seems weird. Okay. Which I guess here's the thing on adjustments too. I would most likely require that the doctor or the office manager, again, if you're comfortable delegating this to your office manager, has to approve all adjustments. Like an adjustment cannot be made without the manager approving it. Like obviously if it's someone paid via patient financing and you're going to be taking an 11% hit or whatever, and you're adjusting that in the system. Some people enter, let's say with, they're doing Care Credit or Lending Club or somebody. Some people enter that as, say it's a $10,000 payment. So you're not going to get $10,000. You're going to get anywhere from, $9,300 to $8,900, right? So some people will enter it as the $9,300 or $8,900 and then enter an adjustment to balance it out. Okay. Some people will enter the full 10,000 and then adjust it down. Right. You want to be careful about this, especially if you have a bonus system, because if you show that you collected 10,000, but you essentially just wrote off, $1,000, you really only collected 9. So this is something you can talk to your accountant about, however you want to do it. But any adjustments that aren't normal everyday ones like that, where you're writing off a balance or whatever, that requires approval. That isn't something that someone can just make a call on, because whether you like it or not, that person is spending money, or whether you believe it or not, that's a spending of your money you were supposed to get. So that should require doctor or office manager approval. And the last point is you have to make sure if you are participating in PPOs, which obviously we recommend that you start cycling your way out. But if you're participating in any type of a plan that requires that you have a different fee schedule, that fee schedule has to be in the system. Otherwise, it generates a bunch of random adjustments that you would not necessarily be anticipating, and it can get very confusing to try to sort things out. And look, these are some basic safeguards, and the idea is this, if you have something super valuable, right? You have a Rembrandt painting that's worth $50 million sitting in your living room, right? Someone's going to figure out probably how to steal it, right? Someone's going to go through, because that's a lot of work to do, unless you have an ingenious way of protecting yourself, right? Someone's going to want to figure out a way to steal it. But using another example, let's say just with your home, the more deterrence that you have, the less apt someone is going to look at you as an easy target. All right. So if you have safeguards in place, if you have oversight in place, rather, it makes you a harder target and less likely to be embezzled from. Of course, there will always be ingenious plans, right? But they are a rarity from what I've seen in my career. And if you put in some basic safeguards, and there are probably other ones we didn't talk about in this episode, if you can think of them, let me know. I'd love to hear your feedback. You can keep yourself from being the 1 out of 10 people that Sabri estimates this has happened to, and stay in that 9 out of 10. And it's best to handle this now to ensure that it does not happen. Anyway, interesting subject. I thought it would be worth throwing out there. I do hope this helps. I have those links on the episode webpage, the financial coordinator training course, where we also have different forms and systems you can use, as well as that cash reconciliation report if you want to download it. If you have any questions, you can email me at jeffb@mgeonline.com, or find us online at mgeonline.com, or call us at 800-640-1140. Folks, have a great week, and we will see you at the next episode.